Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the day at Podcast Fest 2021 by Earshot. For the next 45 minutes, I'll be hosting this session on technology. My name is Sunny Sen, and I'm the co founder and CEO of Consen. And I have with me Sameer Seth, Director Marketing India, Dolby Laboratories Inc., Ken Phillip, co founder of Palina Technologies, Hemant Sajnani, President Technology Digital TV9 Network. But before we start off, let's put some perspective to the discussion we are going to have. A lot of people say podcasts are yet to come of age. Sure, in many parts of the world it does, but think about this. In December 2020, and I repeat, just in the last month of 2020, 58% of the population of South Korea listened to podcasts in 1 month. 40% of the Spanish population listened to podcasts in that same month, and 12.5% of UK listened to podcasts in the last week of December. Those numbers are quite mind-boggling, aren't they? But let's not forget about India. Going by these trends, India is not way behind. Actually, India is one of the leaders. According to PwC's Global Entertainment and Media Outlook 2020 report, India is the third largest consumer of podcasts just after the US and China, with 57.6 million listeners. With that context in our mind, I would like to ask my first question to Sameer. Sameer, why do you think podcasts are exploding, and where do you see it going in the next 1 to 2 years?
Right. Thanks, Sunny. At the outset, let me wish my friends at Earshot a happy first birthday. And coming back to your question on what really, why is podcast exploding? Drawing reference to some of your consumer insight that you just spoke about. I think the last 2 years have shown a significant shift in content consumption habits among Indian consumers. And I want to point to two recent consumer studies that show that Indian consumers actually are seeking an enhanced content experience. Now, the first study that I want to talk about is, a recent July 2021 study from Cyber Media Research, which talks on the importance of audio among smartphone consumers. And it reveals that audio quality actually is the topmost driver, influencing smartphone purchases. And this is ahead of, battery life and camera, which is the, popular belief that you buy a smartphone. The second, consumer study I want to, mention, from a inside perspective, is a October 2020 study by Wakefield, which again points to 94% respondents in India who showed their willingness to pay more for a premium subscription, as long as that subscription, delivers them better or enhanced audio and video quality. And this study further, says that 95% Indians also wanted to try new content types, and they have which content which they have never seen before, and these are great opportunities. So to my mind, this pandemic actually has led to increased content consumption, consumers seeking better experiences, investing in upgrading their services, their streaming services for enhanced audio and video quality, and of course in the process even upgrading their devices. So and last, before I pass this back to you, we are very, very, proud of our partnership with Earshot. And I fondly, remember Earshot's signature podcast, Listen to the Forest in Dolby Atmos. And, the whole sound design, fully immerses you into the forest, without much dialogues. And you can actually hear the birds chirping, the animals around and above you. And that really is the power, of podcasts. And that's the reason I see podcasts exploding if it already hasn't yet.
Right, right. I'll stay with the explosion of our podcast for one more minute, and I'll pass it on to Ken, and because Ken, you have a worldview of technology, right, Ken? And podcast itself is not new. We have seen people talking, radio jockeys talking over the radio, and so on and so forth. That became podcast. The first podcast, I think, started somewhere in the early 2000. Over the period of time, there are so many podcasts, right? There is the enhanced podcast, which comes with the slide cast. There are video podcasts, live podcasts. The podcast section itself is evolving, and so that is that one of the reasons why there is an explosion, because there is so much choice today, so many different formats. What is it like from a tech lens perspective that is driving the explosion? Ken, you are on mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So look, when you look at it from a technology perspective, right? I think the explosion is largely driven because of search and because, like, I mean, if you just look at it in the past 1 year, right, it's primarily the pandemic, right? Because people were at home, right? It's not just podcasts, it's like in general, digital in general, right? There's been a huge growth in user base, right? And it's because people were at home, people had access, unlimited access to digital devices, right? And this led to people also trying to reach out to new kind of content, right? And one of those being podcasts. I mean, at least in India, like a lot of people were new to the concept of listening to podcasts, right? And it's because they were trying to like explore content that was non-video in format, because, like, once you just keep watching video, like, say, about like more than 3 or 4 hours, you probably, like, dry out, your eyes try drying out and stuff, and you want to like probably just listen to something else, or like experience something else is completely different, right? Music, yes, but I love music, right? But then let's just be honest, like, I cannot listen to music for more than, I mean, although I love it, right? It's probably not more than 2 or 3 hours at a stretch I can listen to music, especially when I'm working out and stuff. I listen to like a lot of music, right? So sometimes I keep wanting, like, the stuff I watch on TV or on other streaming apps, if I could just get like an audio output of that, right? And so when you think of audio, what's the best source, right? So that's when you start listening to podcasts, right? And I think that's one of the reasons to why the discovery when it comes to podcasts is automatic in nature. It's like when you try out all the other elements, like, radio, television, streaming platforms, what else is left? Something new, new and fresh, which is young. That's what podcast is all about.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's what led to, or is sort of leading to the growth right now.
Right. What is your favorite podcast, Ken?
I mean, look, I listen to like a lot of comedy, a lot of stand-up comedy, right? So there's nothing particular such. I mean, listen to like a lot of stuff, right? But it's mostly comedy. I wouldn't want to
Right.
name anyone or any particular podcast as such.
Right. Samir, back at you. Do you listen to only podcasts which are powered by Dolby Atmos, or do you listen to something apart from that as well?
I mean, I have no qualms in admitting a positive bias. Yes, of course, I prefer to consume podcasts in Dolby Atmos, and there's some really riveting content that Earshot is already podcasting in Dolby Atmos. So I'll invite viewers to experience it, and then there's no going back. You'll know you'll never go back to stereo.
Right, right. So we usually thought about, so Spotify launched podcasts a long time back. iTunes has its own podcast series. Uh, all Amazon has. There are so many tons of podcast applications out there who have their own podcasts, right? But podcast is a big new thing in the news segment. If you look at New York Times, if you look at BBC, if you look at any of them, so there is the huge the number of podcasts by news platforms is growing tremendously. If I'm not mistaken, that more than 20% of the world's podcasts today are powered by news platforms, right? And that brings me to Hemant. And TV9 network is a huge conglomerate, uh, media conglomerate, which has got multilingual platforms on that end. And how do you see the regional content becoming mainstream listening on podcasts? Do you see that phenomenon happening, or are we too early for that, Hemant?
No, actually, I can say that that transition is happening, and a lot of our we can say the consumers who are specific to a specific language, they have started using content in the form of the podcast as well. So at TV9, we came up with a very small kind of a stitching technology. We tried to stitch the multiple excerpts of the news and came out with a top 9 news segment, which is rolled out at top of every hour. So yes, and we saw a significant improvement of people also, listening to that podcast at the top of every hour, and a notification is going to them, and they've started consuming that pattern of the news as well. So and then we are now transforming it. We started and experimented it with Hindi language first, and we moved on to Marathi and Telugu as well. So yes,
Right.
people are liking this particular trend, that instead of going through or reading the entire stuff as a text, they prefer to hear it out. It is very personal to them as well. So whatever you're hearing is very personal to you. Reading can be shared, watching can be shared as well, but listening is something which is very personal to you.
Right, right. So you talked about stitching technology, and technology is something which I love talking about, especially when it comes to emerging experiences like podcasts is today. 20 years is a very short time in a lifespan of tech, right? Uh, so, do you think that there is a product or a technology playbook, especially when it comes to podcasts, as to are there things that a podcast company should do in the first 2 years, and then in the next 2 to 3 years, and the next 3 to 4 years? Is there a product or a technology hacking system that has come into play? Is there a playbook around that? Ken, would you like to throw some light on it?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat the question once again? I thought I was
I'm saying
hearing.
that is there a technology evolution, is there a technology evolution that is happening in the podcast space? Is there a product playbook or a technology playbook in in the podcast space as well, like we have it in the social space, like we had it in the e-commerce space? Podcast itself is a product. But do we have an evolution roadmap there?
Yes. I mean, look, we do, right? I mean, look, so the way I look at it, right? Uh, Podcast is beautiful, is wonderful, right? But there's also like one issue with podcast. It's that discovery, right? Finding the right kind of content that you want, which is like a major thing that needs to be addressed when it comes to discovering the right kind of content that you're looking for, right? And when we talk about where we are headed to, I think it's about improving the way we kind of look at content, or the way we actually get to a particular content, right? So I think, look, I know we tend to like blame things on the platforms that actually offer content to you, that the search needs to improve on platforms. But there's like a lot more that can be done, and what can be done is fixing things right at the source, right from the source, right, at the creator's end. So I think where we're headed to in the near future is improving the way we actually tag the content that is produced, right, at the creator's end. As of now, when we look at metadata that is on content, it's it's more or less manually done. It's quite a mundane job. It's time consuming. Like, and you put in chapters, you put in labels, you do annotations. It takes a lot of time to do all this stuff. But I think there's going to be a lot of AI features that are going to be inbuilt into the producer's desk, in which it can pick up keywords of the content of the audio file. It's going to pick up keywords very soon and label keywords, and it's going to be like, done with great detail. It's going to be extremely in depth. So once you have keywords labeled with all the proper ins and outs, imagine what's going to happen after that. Imagine the kind of ad targeting that you can get based on the keywords that are, I mean, that extreme depth of keywords present in the content right then and there, right? So I think that's where we're headed to. It's about improving search once it comes to content discovery.
Right. So that would something that would be in interest to Hemant as well. Media companies rely on ads, right, to
Correct.
generate revenue, and podcast. Though there have been some ads in the podcast space, but podcasts generally have not gathered so much of advertisement or advertisers' attention so far.
Correct.
Hemant, do you see that changing? And do you can metadata be used to stitch ads according to content genre, category, etc., and make it more revenue generating at the end?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, of course. So, but I believe that the listeners are going to accept more ads. So when you give them the control, what would they want to listen? They will definitely going to accept more ads. So I was just reading a survey from the Buzzsprout, and it says that 78% of the listeners do not mind ads whenever they are hearing out the podcast. and 62% they end up in buying certain products as well. And the most interesting figure that came to me was around 70% of the people, the listeners, they remember the advertisements which are shared on the podcast. As I told you in my the previous this thing, that it is a very private thing for the listener, and it is targeting one to one. So obviously the impact is going to be huge. And as Ken also mentioned, that the kind of audio annotations and the classifications that can be used for intelligent podcast ad insertions, and how exactly we can achieve the dynamic stitching of the audio ads from available inventory based on the classification, the categories, the topics, the tags the podcast is having, then it is going to change the complete game altogether. Yes.
Right, right. And that also brings us to the aspect of experience and technology experience, all and the user cohorts, all of them go hand in hand, right? I would like to start by asking Samir, because experience is key to Dolby, right? To give a great listening experience, right? And it has been there for years. Uh, do you fear that having a lot of ads and that technology will hinder the experience that Dolby otherwise wants to bring to the table, or do
See,
you think that the
Sad,
ads also will become Dolby enabled?
so by the way, you can deliver your ads using Dolby technology as well. I mean, because ads also are a type of storytelling, right? I mean, if the technology, the way I see technology is an enabler. Now, whether you use technology to enable better storytelling as a creator or as a listener, I think both options are available. And to my mind, advertisements. I also come from a marketing background, and there is a lot of technology solutions available to the advertiser to leverage to do better storytelling using great technology. And talk about cinemas, for example. Cinemas, they come with great audio experience, or even for streaming services. Now, whether they're audio streaming service or video streaming service, how many advertisers have leverage or would want to leverage better technology to do great storytelling through their ads? So I see technology being an enabler, as I said, both for the creator. Now, whether the creator is a content creator or an ad creator, or the listener at the end of it. So it's an enabler there.
Right, right. And so you do not fear that the experience will be broken, in a nutshell.
No, no,
You see
no.
this as a bigger business opportunity for you. So
No, I
you
mean,
give
see, yeah.
Earshot a Dolby environment. Earshot further gets more advertisers and provides a better Dolby experience. Both of you win. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
And
yeah. At the end of it, a platform that can leverage technology to do a better immersive storytelling experience would obviously attract more earlobes, or ear canals, and would eventually lead to better monetization. So we believe in working very closely with all our partners, and I think that is where Dolby as a brand creates value. You create a better product which gets you more listenership, which eventually should help the business at the end of it to monetize. Now, whether we talk about from a Dolby perspective, we work from an ecosystem perspective. We work with the creator of the content to who can use that technology, the service that delivers the content, which is, say, for example, Earshot, and eventually the playback, which is where the mobile experience comes alive, or any device that plays the experience. So the business should benefit using technology, and if you can monetize, why not?
right, right. So, Ken, but there is this huge aspect, and since you look at the tech side of it, there is huge aspect of cost versus technology and experience. So, and how much experience can come at a cost, because so the monetization wheel has not yet unfurled itself in the best possible manner. So, how do you give better experience at a certain cost? Are there technologies? Are you guys looking at technologies which can help give a more superior experience at a lower cost? Are there people talking about these kind of things? What is happening out there?
Look, luckily, it's not just specific to podcasts or the audio industry. it's in general for the whole tech industry. You don't have to go and get the whole infrastructure on your own, right? You can always share the infrastructure. Whatever infrastructure you talk about, you're sharing it. You only have to pay for what you use, right? And there are so many services that provide a shared service sort of an infrastructure, right? So lucky that exists, right? And like I'm sure there are like companies, organizations that believe in owning everything that they would want to do, right, including the servers and the complete infrastructure that goes along with it. But that does not exist anymore. I mean, look, just talk about like the services offered by AWS, right, or by Microsoft. Use any of these services, you're just paying for what you get, and it's, trust me, it's like a lot cheaper. You're not, unlike what used to happen, like even say about 11 years ago, where you were paying a bomb just to get something, just to play something, or a standard website or a standard streaming service that was extremely expensive for the person running the streaming service. It's not that anymore. So yeah, so you're looking at shared services, and it's much cheaper now.
Right, right. So, Hemant, from a news perspective, or especially, since you talked about switching technology in the beginning, you talked about bringing ads into the technology. Do you think that creating a superior listening experience for a commodity business like news is important? And do you think technologies like Dolby and everything can come into the space? I'm asking you this question for a very specific reason. Dolby came to the theaters, but that impact, that effect could not ever come into the living rooms where the televisions were. But here there is an opportunity to give an extremely superior listening experience to anybody who's listening to even commodity services like news. Do you think that that will happen, or are you even contemplating to go into those divisions?
No, of course. So a lot of people, and in fact, in the households also, there is a trend of getting the smart speakers at the home. So, hello Alexa, hello Google, and Hey Siri is very common things in nowadays, right? And according to, I think I read it somewhere, they are like they're giving you more connectivity with other devices as well. So you are going to get a top driver of the satisfaction with the smart speakers when you're using them. And I think I read somewhere in the survey that about 90% of the smart speaker users, they agree that the voice assistants are going to make their life easier. So in similar fashion, when you are asking that, hey Alexa, what are the top news stories of this hour, or maybe the top business stories this hour, and what is happening in the financial markets, how the Sensex is doing, how the Nifty is doing, they would want to hear back in the same response. And the kind of innovations which are happening in the audio space is a clear indication that people are going to adopt to these things, not only to to give them something like voice assistants make them feel more cool, and but other than that, I think it is a more convenient way for them also to consume the news part as well.
Right. But doesn't that look like a distant dream, especially multilingual content? Even though it's becoming the need of the hour, people are consuming a lot of multilingual content, but still AI-based content adaptation or text to speech, especially in regards of Indian languages, that's not becoming mainstream anytime soon. At least from where I see things, unless you see it in a different manner. Do you see that happening? Because you are in the thick of things.
No, it is happening. It is in the developing phase, I should say that, because we ourselves at TV9, we are using the Google Translation APIs very frequently, because as you said that we are in the multilingual business already. We are in the 7 to 8 languages, regional languages. So we feel the need of sharing the news content, a news content which is getting popular in Tamil, why it can't be used by the Hindi audience as well? Just as an example, right? So there are translation APIs, but not with the accuracy level. So if you are talking about the English and Spanish, they have the maximum accuracy in terms of translations. But when it comes to Indian languages, they are like almost we have a lot of languages, and each language has multiple dialects. It is a very complex scenario in the Indian market, right? So yes, it is a difficult work that needs to be done, but the things are getting better. I should say that, they are resumable AI. I use their AI technology for speech to text and text to speech, vice versa. And there was a significant, you can say, improvement. Earlier we were getting this accuracy of 80%. Now we are close to 85 and 90%. So new technologies and NLPs are coming, the GTP3, that is generative pre-trained transformer. So there are technologies which are coming up, and I'm pretty sure that in near future we will be able to overcome to a certain extent of the accuracy in the regional language space as well of India. Yeah.
Right. Is TV9 working with Google or any of those companies to make this enhancements better or more superior?
Yeah, so there are certain, you can say, the open source libraries and the APIs which are available, and we are closely working with Google and Amazon Poly, the two partners for the translation and the transliteration bit as well. Yeah.
So I'm sure that there will be more complaints to them right now from your end than the thank yous, right?
Yeah, so these are the things like which keep on innovating. Like we also work towards the accuracy level. Ultimately, we need to have a moderator who can passes the content and finalizes it that yes, now it is ready for the production, because audio piece is also very important for the users now. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Since we'll stick with the experience bit for a while, because I believe that experience matters a lot. Going back to Samir, so how do you see production value in podcasts? So is it just content, the quality of content as the what the content is about, or is it about the experience that is delivered at the end, despite of irrespective of what kind of content? The content can be crappy, but the experience can be wow. Is that what about, or is this something else?
Sure. So just before I answer that, Sunny, I just want to react to your earlier comment on
Sure.
the living room, for example, right? I mean, how does one get a cinema-like experience in the living room? You should not be surprised. There is actually a lot of content, out there, both from a linear broadcast perspective and even from a streaming, audio, video, and even audio streaming perspective, which powers up, living room devices to get the cinema-like experience. I would not say. I mean, it's difficult to replicate the cinema experience, but you definitely can get the cinema-like experience using technology like Dolby, and Dolby is not only on the audio side of the experience anymore. We power up visual technology, which is where the combined visual and audio experience in living room comes alive, and it's available in not only global audio video and audio streaming services, but even Indian services which are streaming a lot of their content now in Dolby technology. Anyways, now let me come back to your question on production value. When you talk about podcasting in particular, I think production values definitely matter a great deal, and I say technology here helps those help create those production values. From an experience standpoint. So, for example, Dolby Atmos, lets the creator go beyond the traditional sound by precisely letting the creator place and move sound in a three-dimensional space. This really unlocks the full, experience or the emotional impact, for audio only story telling. So I think from a production value standpoint, technology really can help create those production values for the creator, and eventually at the end of it for the experience for the listener.
Right, right. And when you say production value, so I asked you a little more specific around, does the content matter, or is it just the experience that matters? The
See,
way it is delivered.
I think it a lot depends on how the content creator is looking at creating that content. If it is scripted podcast, the technology actually gives you that tool to bring out your creator's intent. Now that the as I said, it's technology is a tool available to the creator to use it. It's like a blank canvas which is available, and if you can treat, especially in podcast, treat audio or sound as objects, and have that flexibility to bring out your full potential as a creator. I think it just adds to the production values, and and that's how the creator should look at creating content for experience, better experience.
Right, right. So, Ken, since we're talking about the session is about tech, I just wanted to ask you that when somebody wants to build, say, a podcast platform or want to do a series, what are those things that become utmost necessary for a creator for today? So, are there any list of things that you think is really critical? Because there are
Uh,
two key aspects to it. One is the discovery, one is the experience, and the third thing is the way it is rendered, kind of thing, right? So at the end, uh, so yeah,
so, so your question is specific to it is required for you to build a platform, right? A podcasting platform,
somebody who
right?
wants to develop a platform or somebody who wants
Yeah,
to host
yeah.
the who host a podcast on a particular platform, what are the things they should look for?
Okay, so I'll talk about developing a platform first, right? So to
Okay,
develop a platform, you would obviously need resources, right? You would need people who can code the platform for you,
that's true.
right? So you obviously have to go multidimensional, right? All devices, Android, iOS, or website, right? All platforms. Although we talk about mobile first, we normally in technology we tend to start with a mobile web first and then build apps around it, right? Uh, then there are things to be factored in. That's infrastructure that goes in everything that streams. Where's your database lying? Your content. Where's your content? Right. So that's the infrastructure, right? So that is again things like your data center service like AWS, Microsoft, all these platforms. And then we're talking about the user base, user getting like somehow getting the user base, which is sort of a complicated task in itself, right? You can build a platform, you can build all of that, but getting to the end user and asking them somehow getting them to come on board, that's a whole different strategy that we're talking about, right? Use aggregation and stuff, right? So that's where I guess the maximum investment goes in. Apart from building the platform, your most of your investment goes in somehow getting the users to discover your platform, right?
Right,
Now imagine your platform is there, you have like a set of users, a decent user base, right? Now it's about how do you engage the users, how do you get the users to come back to your platform, right? How do you make them stick to your platform in a way they spend a reasonable amount of time every day on your platform, right? So again, that's a different strategy. So look, every day, every step of the way, there are strategies involved, right? You just cannot build a platform and say it's going to work. It does not work to that. I mean, there's like a lot you got to do to make sure you get the user base and make sure the existing user base sticks onto your platform, right? So which means in a lot of ways, what I'm trying to say is that even though the first initial thing is like somehow getting the technology out there, what actually makes the platform work is the popular saying content is king. Your content has to be great, right? No matter what your platform is, you could have the best platform out there, but unless your content really works, users don't tend to stick. And you
right,
also get users, getting the users to come on board is also sort of after a while becomes automatic in nature, because it's not advertising on Waves platforms, it's not advertising on Facebook or Google or Twitter, on all the platforms. It's about word of mouth, because that's what really plays, right? If I love something on your platform, I'm going to tell like a bunch of my friends to come onto your platform and listen to it, right? And that works. Trust me, word of mouth is what really works, right?
right,
Traditional advertising is good to get the initial set of users on your platform, but after that, your content really has to work. So I would say technology is important. It's really important to get you started and get you going, right? And in a way, it needs to be future proof. But what keeps it rolling is your content, right? And I'm sure content creators will be happy to hear this, because I'm sure there's a constant fight: is it technology or is it content? Is it technology or is it content? Me, I can say this. I can say this with confidence, because I used to be in the media industry before all of this, before technology and before software. I used to be a producer, right? So I understand how both industries work, and I know how important content is, and content is king, there's no doubt about it, right? Now, once you're there, now, so that is like you getting your platform out there in the market, right? I just put it like probably in a 2-minute talk, but it's a little more complicated than that, right? But now let's look at things from a content creator's perspective, right? Now, from a content creator's perspective, right, it's about you having the right tools, right? They say when it comes to podcasts, it first starts with your mic. How good is your mic, right? So it's important that you get like a fairly decent mic, So it's wise to spend uh, pretty decent amount money getting a good mic, right? And then the tools that you use to record yourself, right? Making sure like and then the having like a small studio setup in a way that your quality of audio that's recorded is pretty good, right? and then further putting your podcast out there in the various platforms available. I mean, the platforms are already readily available, right? You don't have to like go around building your own platform to put your own podcast, right? But you can get started by using any of the existing platforms. That's there. That could be Apple Music or Spotify or any of the existing platforms, Earshot, right? uh yeah, so that's what I would say. That's what I mean, like, I guess that answers your question, right?
Right, right.
Oh, sorry, Samir.
Right. So Hemant, one more aspect, and I wanted to understand that, unlike in the radio space where you could just listen, here the way the when we since we are talking about discovery, here the way the platform looks, how the thumbnail is featured, is it a big enough thumbnail to decipher the descriptor, how beautiful the fonts are, how clear or legible these every single aspect of it, all those things become very important. So it is just
Correct.
not an audio experience, it
True.
also becomes a visual experience that people have to cater to, right? So as a
True.
content platform, how do you see this from a criticality standpoint?
Sure. So yes, absolutely. The presentation of the content is always going to be important, no matter if it is in the form of audio end of the day. But people used to see it first before hit the play button, right? So the thumbnails, as you said, it is a science in itself. Image is something which is a very important piece whenever we are putting it out on OTT platforms, on podcasts, on any of this thing. Why? Because even for, say, for the Apple podcast, there is a standard dimension that has to be submitted. It has to be by 3000 pixels, 3000 by 3000 pixels, in the sense that they need to serve high quality images in order to ensure and right color combinations and right text in the legible fonts, as you said, mentioned correctly, because that is going to give the first impression that what your podcast is all about, and followed by the specific title and the metadata information, which make users more curious to know that, okay, now I would want to listen to it. So yes, the presentation is very important and detailed attention needs to be given to that. Pause.
Right. So as a platform, do you really invest in that, in the
Yes.
because user experience is the least invested area when it comes to technology today. Uh, User experience and especially user interface, these are the two least invested areas when it comes. People build the
Correct.
technology, but they don't care about how the users will navigate through a platform.
Correct.
So how do you see that?
Yeah, so that is very important, and the user journey is the utmost important thing for any app to be a successful app, or any website to look beautiful and be recognized by users. So the brand value is tightly integrated how exactly your things are going to be presented to the end users. So UX for me is a very important aspect of any product. And for podcast, the thumbnails, the kind of experience that includes the onboarding experience as well. It is not only the kind of streaming that is happening for the listeners, but how soon and quickly they're onboarded on your app. That journey starts from there. And coming to your portal, how exactly they're able to filter the content, how the content is being presented to them, how the recommendations are working for them. Everything matters. Everything matters for an end users to stick to your platform and consume the content. Besides
Right.
having the smooth streaming experience, which is the key. Yes.
Of course, of course. Sure. So I'm being prompted that I need to wrap up in 2 minutes. So I'll quickly go to this aspect which Samir did point out to. So Apple recently said that they will no longer let users subscribe to podcasts. Instead, podcast fans will follow their favorite shows. Samir, what material difference does this make to the universe?
I think it's very critical. I mean, anything that can aid, discovery, for the consumer, I think is key. Irrespective of the content form. You talk streaming video, you talk streaming audio. I think, a lot of platforms. I don't want to name, brands here, but a lot of platforms are actually technology driven. While they are content platforms, but they, pay a lot of heed, in helping discovery of the content, and that really to my mind is key. To your reference about, Apple, moving from calling it subscription to following, I think is testimony to the importance that the platform plays in pays to aid discovery. We at Dolby do that with all our service partners. There's a lot that we do with them on the UI, the UX piece, which helps the consumer discover the content with great ease, help the right thumbnails and the right messaging, more importantly the badging, which really can help the consumer find the content easily.
Right. Last question to all three of you, and we'll go one by one. Uh, do you think that technology can overall ensure safety when it comes to podcasts, and how is that aspect coming up?
Okay, so the question.
Why don't you start, Ken?
Okay, so I guess you talk about brand safety, right?
Brand safety, yes.
Yes. So that is imperative. I mean, that is a topic of discussion these days when it comes to technology and brand safety, right? Let me just talk about this from an advertiser's perspective, right? Look, for an advertiser, once you start advertising on a particular podcast or a particular show, right? They sort of, I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't use the word endorsing the show or the content, but they get like a lot of it somehow attributes to them, right? In the sense, like, they are closely linked to that particular piece of content, right? So it's important that the brand is aware of what is actually happening in the piece of content, right? So there are systems that are coming up. There are systems that are being put in place in which you can actually automatically transcribe the audio, right? The audio gets automatically transcribed to text, right? And once this happens, I'm sure things are going to be a lot easier for people to track the content of the podcast. It's easier than listening to the entire show than just search keywords on text. So I think that is one way to ensure brand safety, and there are systems that are being put in place to handle these situations.
Right. Hemant, especially when it comes to news, advertising has been there, and brands can see it. But in podcast, do you see enough brands being thinking and talking about brand safety, brand awareness, and being part of podcasts? Do you see that happening?
Yeah, so that is, as Ken mentioned, that it is a very important piece. So people who do not want to get associated with a specific piece of content, with specific tags which are there. Say, for example, my podcast is about the alcohol, or something which my advertisers do not want to be there because it is not in line with their product line, right? So I should have the facility in order to ensure that their brands are not coming up there in that particular piece, in that particular podcast, whenever it is being aired. So that you can say that restriction needs to be put in place in order to ensure that we are following the correct practices, and giving the brands enough flexibility, to be there with the relevant tags, relevant categories, relevant genres in which they would want to promote themselves.
Right. Great. I think with that, we'll call this a wrap. It was lovely talking to each one of you. Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Hemant. Uh,
Thank you so much.
we could have gone on for another half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm sure. It's lovely to meet all of you here virtually, though. And thank you, Earshot, for hosting the Podfest 2021 on your first birthday. Happy birthday again, and wish you a great year ahead. Thank you, everybody, for being on the show with me.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Annie. Pleasure.